All right, hello again, everyone. This is Bob, and I am here today to talk about another comic. I don't have it sitting here in front because I kind of wanted to hit it as a surprise. But right here, you do see my character, Ghost Girl, comic that I am currently drawing, which should be complete in the next month or two, at which time you will be able to purchase it if you're interested. So if you want to stay informed with this, then hit subscribe. So that way you'll be able to get any new information that comes out about it. Okay, and without further ado, I present to you Superman, the Man of Steel, #1 by John Byrne. Um, this was not a comic that I read in 1986 when I was 11 years old. Um, I read some comics again. My parents would get comics, so I think most of what I read at that time would be Green Lantern and Spider-Man. Uh, this I read later because, of course, it's John Byrne. I wanted to get some classic John Byrne. When he's at the peak of his art skills. I have X-Men, Dark Phoenix Saga. Which is classic Byrne. Days of Future Past, things like that. I also have the Next Men, which is it's great artwork, but that wasn't this John Byrne. So here we go. Superman, Man of Steel, #1. It says it's a 6-part miniseries by Byrne and Giordano. Okay, but Giordano, as far as I know, is the inker on this, whereas John Byrne is the writer and penciler. And of course, we're going to start here on Krypton. So same story. We're getting Superman's origin again. I think this is a reboot that they ended up getting John Byrne to do because of dying sales for Superman. So they were like, let's bring in John Byrne and have him redo this because he was a big name in comics at the time, especially having done X-Men. And I believe he did Alpha Flight at this time. I'm not sure about that. I've never read or purchased Alpha Flight, but I do now have a bunch of copies, so that's something I'm going to have to get into and check out. So here we go. We are on Krypton, and we have this ship flying towards this tower here, and we find out that that ship is something that Jor-El called in. That is or actually, this is Jor-El coming in the ship, and this is Keelix and Keelor. And Jor-El is asking them, where's the child? And they're like, child's in this room or whatever. So he goes in, and there it is. There is baby Kal-El in this pod. This is where the infants were gestating, I guess, were in these pods. And he had brought the pod in from where they would be producing these children, since they didn't do it the classic way, as it were. And then Laura comes in, and she's just like, hey, why is our kid here? I can't believe you would do such a thing. And Jor-El's just like, hey, I can do it. I'm entitled to. There's no law against it. This is my son, and I'm allowed to bring him here. And, she's just like, but, this is out of the ordinary. This is not something we would normally do. And he's like, well, things are getting bad, Laura. Our planet is dying. We've done too much here. And what I've done now is brought our child here because I'm going to be sending him to a world that I found. And then he shows her the world Earth and shows her the people of Earth, which blows her mind. Because right now we've got a half-nude male here, and apparently that's a big no-no on Krypton. They're much too civilized for that type of thing. And she can't believe that Jor-El's going to be sending her child to a planet full of brutish Neanderthals, such savages that haven't come into their own yet. And Jor-El starts explaining to her that with the yellow sun of our solar system, that Kal-El will end up being like a giant solar battery, and he'll collect the energy from that sun and become stronger, and he'll be like a god to these people. So Jor-El knew that this will, make Kal-El basically indestructible by sending him there, so he wouldn't have to really worry about it. And of course, as he's explaining this, then we have Krypton beginning to explode. So he races over to this, and Laura kind of helps. She's just like, I can't believe this is happening. This is all so sudden and everything. And he launches baby Kal-El into space towards Earth. And Jor-El then confesses to his wife Laura that while they were brought together simply because their genes were compatible uh, for the birthing process, that he actually had feelings for her, but he didn't know what that was until he studied the Earth people, and he realized that the whole time he did love her. Okay, so here we go with baby Kal-El leaving an exploding Krypton and going into hyperspace. Cut to what I would assume is present day, even though it's 1986. We've got Clark Kent playing football and apparently tearing it up. Okay, so this is a thing where I think a lot of people, I had read this somewhere, or a lot of people had told me that this was kind of one of their issues with the Man of Steel, was that it was too technical. Like John Byrne felt that he needed to explain everything to clean it up so that we know how things work with Superman in this new rebooted Superman universe. But here we have Clark Kent basically using his powers to win at football. And we've got Pa Kent, Jonathan Kent here, looking a little disappointed. So he's like, "Hey, Clark, we've got to talk. We got to talk now." Even though Clark was supposed to go get sodas or whatever with Lana, and Jonathan's like, "No, seriously, we need to talk." So he's like, "Okay," and he's letting them know that he's a little disappointed at the way he was acting because, here we can see here's a lot of angry people sitting on the bench that apparently don't get to play football because Clark is too good. So Jonathan determines that now is the time to talk to Clark about where he came from. So this is something that kind of eats at me because obviously Clark is in high school, okay? He is 16, 17 years old, playing football, and in all that time, he wasn't taught that people don't have these superpowers. Is that what's going on? So that seems weird to me because he tells Clark, "Go ahead and lift it. You'll have the strength to do that with no problem." And he does, and sees this spaceship here, at which time Jonathan starts telling him the whole story about how he crash landed on Earth and they saved him, and they didn't know where he had come from, but Martha Kent was like, "Well, we're going to make sure that this baby's not hurt, and we're going to take this kid in." And then, of course, there was a blizzard that apparently had everybody snowed in for several months. And by the time the snows had melted, they just simply said that Martha was pregnant the whole time and that she ended up giving birth at the house. Okay, that's a believable part. I like that. That was a question I always kind of asked myself. I'm not from Kansas. I don't know how that works. I don't know how far away neighbors are from each other on these farmlands. Do people go and check on each other? Do they talk to people or whatever? I've never, I have read a lot of Superman comics and everything. I can only assume that Jonathan and Martha had friends who would talk or come over from time to time. How would they explain just a baby appearing? But that's a good story to clear that up. Now here we're talking about how Clark Kent started growing up, and then he gets trampled by a bull. And, he's a young kid or whatever. And Jonathan thought, "Oh my God, this is the end of Clark Kent." But when he goes over there, he just sees that Clark's clothes are ripped up, but Clark is perfectly fine. Okay. Now that's something that's going to come back to in a moment that we're going to talk about. Because I want to point that out for somebody who's being like so meticulous about the mechanics and everything, or how everything technically works with Superman. I feel like there's a couple of slip ups that end up being a bit of an issue. But again, it's definitely fine. But here we go where we have young Clark again lifting up a car, and then we have Clark looking through a wall with his X-ray vision, and then Clark getting knocked off a cliff, only to find out that he can fly. Now again, he has to know other people don't have these powers. Not everybody was keeping it a secret, right? how old is he here when all of this is taking place? And Jonathan's now telling him, like, hey, you came from another world, and this is why you have these abilities. And so Superman starts to get weak, which Jonathan assumes is because he's getting hit with too much truth all at once, and that it's a bit of a shock. When in reality, we know that there's probably kryptonite here that's affecting Superman, but he doesn't know what his weaknesses are yet. Okay, so they go back home, and Martha comes out, and she's like, "Where have you guys been?" And apparently, they say, "Yes, he told me. He knows. Everybody knows." So Clark Kent immediately comes to this realization that, now that I know I'm an alien with special powers, then I need to go out there and help people, okay? And that no one should ever know it's me. They should think that it's an act of nature or something, or a miracle that took place, not that there was a Superman that just saved them. That's a very quick leap to find, you had these powers that never occurred to you before. You just were like, okay, I'll play football. But the second that you find out you're an alien, then you're like, okay, then because I'm an alien, I am going to, protect the people of Earth and do all of this. I don't know. I just don't feel like that was a logical leap to take place there. I know that John Byrne is trying to fit this origin into the first issue so he can move on with a story. But I feel like there were just some leaps here that did not tend to make sense. So here we go again, where, I think this is going to be a leap into the future from this point, a couple years, where we have Martha Kent collecting a scrapbook, basically, of everything that she knows that Clark is doing, but is coming off as natural disasters and such. But Jonathan is a little freaked out, saying that, hey, what if somebody were to break into our house and read your scrapbook? What would they think? They would know that our son is Superman. I do not feel that that is a logical leap. That if somebody saw that this is simply a scrapbook, and I have to say also, if I'm breaking into somebody's house, I'm not looking at their scrapbooks. I'm looking for their jewelry or their money or something. I'm not going in there to read scrapbooking or anything like that. So I kind of find it funny that that's what he thinks would happen with this. But here he sees a headline in this paper where mysterious Superman saves space plane. So he's already thinking, the jig is up here. And then, of course, there's a sound from upstairs. So Jonathan Kent gets the table leg or whatever it is and goes up and sees that it's Superman sitting in a dark room and kind of brooding here. But all Superman says is, they wanted a piece of me. They all wanted a piece of me. Okay? So now Superman starts telling the story of what happened, where this space plane was going up. And of course, some civilian plane flew in here, which is not a thing that really should happen. But okay, accidents happen or whatever. But it hit the wing of this plane and they started going down. And as you can see here, and there was no hope. No one's going to be able to save them. And Clark is in the middle of this super crowd here. And he's like, there's no time for anything else. I am just going to have to go after this plane if I'm going to save any of the lives. So he just flies right out of the crowd and goes up there. Now, of course, we have Lois Lane on this flight. I believe that this was specifically taken for the Superman Returns storyline with Brandon Routh as Superman, where, they had an experimental plane or whatever, and Lois Lane was on there too. Now, I had heard that story came from a J.J. Abrams screenplay called Superman Flyby. But again, it's all from this. So apparently, I guess maybe J.J. Abrams took that story from here and then rewrote it for a movie. And then when that movie got scrapped and they decided to do Superman Returns, then they used that portion of the story, which again came from here. But they start talking about how they're going to die, and then all of a sudden they're leveling off. And this one woman can see on the monitor here that apparently it's a guy holding the plane up. Okay. I don't know if that's the conclusion I would come to immediately if I were looking out there. I might think that there's a guy hanging onto the plane. But I guess with the plane leveling off and then seeing this person here, you could logically think that, hey, somebody just corrected this plane and he's a Superman. So Clark lands this plane And immediately, Lois Lane seems a little angry about it. That seems weird. It's like, hold it right there, Buster. Where do you think you're going after saving my life? Okay? So she comes over, and he's talking about how almost immediately there was a spark between them. He could feel it, that he was like in love with her. Okay. I've heard people say, they can't understand why Clark Kent likes Lois Lane the way he does. I mean, it's what it was. I've had attractions like that with certain women before, where it was just a thing. There was a spark, there was a click. I get it, okay. And again, I feel like John Byrne had to put that in here because he apparently needed to put everything in the first issue, including Clark's love for Lois Lane. Okay. So, after he's sitting there talking to Lois Lane, the whole crowd comes over and they're like, hey, dude, we watched you fly out and save those people and everything. And, who are you? What are you? Blah, blah, blah. Right? Now, he did mention also that the only thing he could do at this moment was to like vibrate himself a little bit so that his face was a bit of a blur and that nobody would be able to make him out. And that's another thing that kind of sits with me. Like, I think like it was Civil War when Peter Parker like took his mask off in front of a news crew, and it's like, okay, who's gonna recognize you, dude? Like, only people who know you are going to recognize you. Okay, some of these villains or whatever that would see your face, they would just be like, who is this kid? I don't know who this is. They would have to get a name and everything in order to determine that. So he would have just been some nameless dude in a crowd. And there's got to be, another couple thousand people that look like him. Everybody's got a doppelganger or whatever. So there's probably men out there that people come up to all the time and say, hey, you look just like Superman. But, so he's very upset about how much these people, wanted to find out about him after he saved this plane. And Jonathan Kent's like, I think I've figured out a way to solve that problem. So they have Martha start constructing a super suit for Superman, which will be a disguise, if you will. And they created the Superman S, one for the front and one for the back, that Martha's going to put on the outfit. And she's talking to him as she's making the suit, and he's talking about how, hey, I can just slick my hair back and put these glasses on, and I look like a completely different person. And I agree, that would probably work. I know that during Corona, when people would wear masks, you would see half of their face, and your mind would immediately, like, imagine, I guess, what the rest of the face looked like. But then when a mask came off, there were a lot of times where I'm like, wow, that is, like, not what I expected. You look completely different than I had imagined. And the same thing can be said for glasses as well. So Superman gets undressed, and he starts putting the super suit on, and Martha starts talking about how, she made the suit skin tight on purpose because she noticed that clothing that was closer to his skin would not be damaged. Like he was giving off some kind of force or force field or something like that that would protect the clothing. But as we saw with little Clark in the beginning when he got ran over by that bull, that's not what happened. His clothing got ripped. I don't know if they're going to try to say that, that clothing wasn't close enough to the skin, or if he was too young and he hadn't started generating that field yet. I don't know. I just felt like that was a weird thing. I feel like they could have just made this out of Kryptonian cloth that was inside the ship, and that it would be, kind of indestructible or tougher than normal fabric, whatever the deal is. But she's also talking about how, it's skin tight to show off his muscles, which is a little weird, but it's what it is. So he puts on the super suit, and he says that from now on, saving the people who need it and everything, it's not a job for ordinary Clark Kent. It will be a job for Superman. And here we have this awesome Superman here. This is one of the better looking Supermans I've ever seen. John Byrne was a great choice for this comic. I have to tell you, I've talked before about a lot of comics that don't give you enough story for the price. They're over too quickly. You get 10 words in the whole book. Nothing's ever explained. You're not introduced to anyone. We do not have that issue here. If anything, there was a bit too much story fit into the book, but I don't think that's something I will ever complain about. You got a complete story here for the origin of Superman. Let's get that origin done. Let's move on to the next issue where we're going to do other things, right? I believe the next issue here, because you can see these are the covers to these issues. The next issue is going to be something more about Lois Lane. Third issue here, we have Batman. Fourth issue, we're going to have Lex Luthor. You know, so there's a plan here going into all of these, and I kind of like that idea of how the covers are set up to where this one is going to be the birth of Superman. This is why we're getting that picture, and also the ship leaving Krypton. So I have to say, this is, as a #1 issue goes, this gives you everything. You get some action, you get an origin story, maybe too much of an origin story. You get everything laid out for you, and in a way that I think will answer any questions. There won't be any, like a surprise or anything like that, or mysteries or something. This is all right here. I have to say, it's definitely worth it. I've got more of these. I'm going to be going through the rest of these as well. Actually, I purchased the collected editions as well, because when this turned into an ongoing title, it started bouncing back and forth between all of the Superman comics. So, it would start here in Man of Steel, and then it would go over to Action Comics, and then it would go over to Superman. So you had to actually collect all the titles in order to get a complete story, which, in all honesty, I don't know. You're buying so many comics when you go to a comic store that it's kind of annoying that you have to buy 6 of the same title to get the full story, and then also go collect the other titles that you wanted to collect. If I just wanted to read Man of Steel because I like John Byrne's artwork and writing, I would also now have to collect Action Comics, even if I wasn't into that. So it's fine. The collected editions added those stories in there so that you get the complete story. But after the first collected edition, which is the first 6 issues of this, then we're only getting like every 3rd issue is John Byrne, and the rest are whoever we're working on the other comics. But again, I will get into those. So if you liked this video, hit like. I would appreciate it. It helps my channel grow. I am a comic book artist, like I said before, that is trying to get his name out there. Also, if you would like to see more videos, hit subscribe, so that way you'll know when a new one comes out. Alright guys, until next time.